So this is a game I made last year for Brackeys Jam 2020.2. The theme was Rewind, so I figured that a lot of people would probably take that to make some sort of time rewinding mechanic, but I thought I'd go a different direction and made a sort of Blockbuster-inspired game where you work at a video rental store and you have to make sure that everyone's rewound the VHS tapes that they're returning. One of the first things I did was implement a money system where, given a certain amount of money, it would decide which bills and coins are needed to create that. A good thing with how real currency is set up is that this is an easy sort of algorithm. You start with the highest denomination of bill that you can fit, and you work your way down. Luckily, there's no currency I know where you have things like $7 bills where you're trying to make $14, and my algorithm would, give you a $10 bill and 4 $1 coins when you could have just had 2 nice $7 bills instead. I decided the way the player would keep track of what's happening is they would have a sort of clipboard on the side where they would be listing how many fees of each type they're charging, and then when they click the enter button, the customer would give them that amount of money, and if you overcharge them, the customer would get angry, and if you undercharge them, the customer would be happy. And then you can see there's a few types of VHSs you can get back. Some where the tape is being pulled out, where it can be repaired, and some where the VHS itself is just destroyed, which means it's trash and you have to charge them extra. Next up, I added in a sort of time cycle for the game, so there's a clock in the background that shows how far along in the day you are, and then the calendar shows what day it is, and at the end of every day, I was going to have it be that you would have to pay some sort of daily fee so that there was actually a reason and incentive to make money and go quickly. I used random number generation to make my customers. I drew up like a few different body types and faces, eyes and hair, and would have it randomly pick from a list of different sprites and then randomly pick colors to color it in. There were some restrictions to the colors, like the t-shirts could be anything, but the skin tones, you can't have like a purple person come in, so I restricted those ones a bit. And with those things in place, the main game loop was essentially done. A customer would show up, give you some VHS tapes, you would charge them for what they had brought you, they'd give you money, you'd put it in the register, and it would repeat until the end of the day, where you would get various bonuses or whatever, and then continue on. The sort of end state of the game was just after you reach a certain amount of money, it would just have a really generic windscreen pop up. So like a common bit of feedback that I got was that people didn't really know what to do. I had made this sort of how to play screen, but something like this that's just a wall of text, you just kind of glance at it briefly and then you just go and play the game, and then you're here with a VHS sitting on the table and you don't really know what you're supposed to do with it. After the game jam, I decided I'd go back and try to fix a few things to make the gameplay a bit more clear, and also just some generic fixes to the art style and things like that. For starters, I made the UI a bit more readable. I decided to make the fees thing appear on a bit of a clipboard so it kind of fit in with the game world a bit more. And I also made the cash and loyalty meters update daily in a little graph. I later changed it so that they would always update after every purchase. I added in a window in the background that sort of showed what time of day it was, because a lot of people don't really read analog clocks that well. I'm one of those people, and even with that, you can't necessarily tell if it's AM or PM just by looking at an analog clock. Another completely unnecessary thing I added in was the characters talking. I just recorded myself making a sound for every single letter in the alphabet and treated those as sort of phonemes to create words with. Obviously, that's not how language actually works, because each letter, at least in English, each letter doesn't necessarily correspond to one phoneme alone, like one sound alone, but oh well. So finally I made it so that some of the conversations could be scripted, so that in this case you have a sort of boss character come in and he tells you what you're going to do. I also made it so that I could disable certain VHS types. So here you only get rentals and you just process those. And then the next day you start getting returns, and now the return bin is available. And then as the game goes on, each individual concept is introduced so that the player can learn how to deal with them naturally instead of just reading a big text dump trying to explain it all in one go. And of course, a big change was I made the people look slightly less horrific, which I think was probably a good call. So that's it. That's a post-mortem of this abomination I created. I think my biggest takeaway, especially from going back and trying to improve on it after the jam, was to really ensure that the player could figure out how to play through the gameplay, especially for something like a game jam where you don't really expect people to be investing a lot of time into playing the game. You want them to just kind of pick up and start immediately and not have to really try hard to learn the game. So the game can be played on browser and itch.io. That's another thing I think is pretty good for game jam games, is to make them browser playable, because no one really wants to be downloading a bunch of EXEs when they're trying to look at stuff that's happened in a game jam. And if it's playable in a browser, people are more likely to actually give it a shot, since it just loads automatically once they open the web page. Anyway, that's it.